this is where we left off when everything froze. So this is just a BuzzFeed thing to show you what can't happen. And I wrote mundane and I spelled it wrong, and I'm sorry. Should I try again? I don't know if that's why it froze. I'm not sure, but I'll try. Mundane space. All right, so this is a sort of thing that can happen in non-sacred space, right? In mundane space. And this is all terrible, awful stuff that cannot ever happen in the tabernacle. We can't have this. So this light that's out of whack, this terrible piece of bread, for some reason, this bagel is cut in this way. All of these are things that cannot happen in sacred space if God is going to live there. This is stuff that happens in the human realm, in the place where you and I live, but it can't happen in sacred space. This is just awful. You've probably had a trapper keeper that did that. Your hands get, okay, this one is the one that really speaks to me. So the reason that we're so detailed at the end of Exodus in a really annoying way is so that nonsense like this doesn't happen in the tabernacle. Yahweh can't live in a place that the tiles look like this, or in a place that you just can't quite get the bench right. Yahweh can't be present when this happens, when you're opening packaging. And these puppies that are full of nonsense, and they are the worst thing that's ever happened to humanity, they wouldn't be allowed near the tabernacle, because the tabernacle is sacred space, and these puppies have fouled up royally. I hate it when that happens. Okay, if you had a toilet in the tabernacle, it could not be like this. Like when you sit down and you're all like, whoa, 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 somebody didn't tighten the stuff on the toilet seat. No, that can't happen, not in sacred space. This, sometimes students tell me that this is photoshopped, and maybe it is, but look at all of the shadows. It seems like maybe it's not. I don't know. But this sort of nonsense can't happen in sacred space. That can't happen. I don't know how many of you clean out your emails regularly. I don't, so this doesn't bother me, but it does bother some people. Right here, this is a great example of something that could not happen in the tabernacle. This can happen in mundane space, but this cannot happen in the tabernacle, in sacred space, where Yahweh is going to dwell. None of these things can happen in sacred space. I have no idea why this has occurred. This one really irritates me. Like, get it in rainbow order, people. People who eat Kit Kats like this are not allowed in sacred space. They can't go near to the Holy of Holies because they're wrong and evil. Parking like that is evil. This unsatisfying gift, these boots, all of these things are very evil. Right here, this is a great example too. The reason we're so detailed, once again, is so that stuff like this, stuff that can happen in mundane space, cannot happen in sacred space. So hopefully you're kind of getting my drift at this point. Another thing that's important, now that Yahweh is going to dwell among the people, everything is going to have to change. I'm going to have to take away my mundane space deal. Clear all. And then we're taking away the annotation. So a lot of everything is going to have to change for the people of God now that Yahweh is going to dwell in their midst. I'm sorry about this. Sometimes things get out of whack. We already did that. So God is going to live among them. We've got the tabernacle. We've looked at what sacred space means. But not only do people now need to be really, really careful about sacred space, but because Yahweh is going to dwell among them, they're going to have to live in a certain way. So we've got all of these laws in Exodus to Leviticus. And there are laws that govern how human relationships will be. So Yahweh is going to live at the very center of their camp. So here's the tabernacle, right? And then each of the 12 tribes are going to live around Yahweh. Let's say that I can draw 12 of these. And so Yahweh is going to be in their center, and that means that the sacred space in which Yahweh lives is going to kind of, what is that going to do? Is going to permeate or come outward towards them. So now if you live here among the people of God with Yahweh in your center, you're going to have to abide by a certain new set of rules, which we already know because we know that the law came. But it's going to be more than just laws about how to build the tabernacle where Yahweh lives. We're going to have to really mind our P's and Q's when it comes to the laws that organize people. So there are laws between people and people. Because you live in this camp with Yahweh in your midst, you're going to have to behave correctly. And so we're going to turn to Exodus chapter 22, verses 1 through 6. And we're going to find here laws that govern how people should interact with each other. Because if Yahweh lives among you, you're going to have to interact with one another correctly. So 22 verses 1 through 6. When someone steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it and sells it, the thief shall pay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. So if you steal something, you're going to have to repay it. And you're going to have to repay a lot more than you originally stole. Then we've got, let's see here. If a thief is found breaking in and is beaten to death, no blood guilt is incurred. But if it happens after sunrise, blood guilt is incurred. So if you beat someone to death in the middle of the night who's breaking into your house, that's okay. But if it's light outside, then you're going to have to be held accountable for murdering someone. When someone causes a field or a vineyard to be grazed over, or lets livestock loose to graze in someone else's field, restitution shall be made. When a fire breaks out and catches thorns on fire, you'll have to be held responsible if you are the one who lit the fire. So all of these kind of make sense, and they make sense for living together, but they're very specific, and they govern the people of God now. They have to act in a specific way. Then we've got 22:21. Which says, you cannot wrong or oppress a resident alien, for you were aliens in Egypt. So they're always going to kind of look back on their time in Egypt and remember that time. And Yahweh tells them that if a foreigner lives among them, then they have to treat that person with respect. You shall not abuse a widow or an orphan. If you do abuse them, when they cry out to me, I will surely heed their cry. My wrath will burn, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows, and your children orphans. So Yahweh's taking this seriously. You have to treat people in the right way if you're going to live with Yahweh in the center of your camp. 25. If you lend money to people, to the poor among you, you shall not deal with them as a creditor. You shall not exact interest from them. If you take your neighbor's cloak in pawn, you shall restore it before the sun goes down. These are really weird laws. We don't abide by these laws in our modern society. Because they're so odd. You can't charge people interest. If you take somebody's cloak as collateral, you have to give it back at night so that they can stay warm. These are the kind of laws that you follow when Yahweh lives in your midst. And finally, in Leviticus 25, so I'm going from Exodus all the way over to Leviticus, we've got these strange laws about the year of Jubilee. And so in 25:39, it says, if any who are dependent on you become so impoverished that they sell themselves to you, you shall not make them serve as slaves. They shall remain with you as a hired or bound laborer. So you can't have slaves if you have God living among you. That's not what God has intended. They shall serve with you until the year of Jubilee. Now, this is a really weird thing. Every 50 years in Israel, this is the way it was supposed to be because Yahweh was living in their midst. Every 50 years, people would have to release folks that were serving them. Then in the year of Jubilee, they and their children with them shall be free from your authority. They shall go back to their own family and return to their ancestral property. For they are my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. So if you're going to live with Yahweh in your midst, then you're going to have to be really serious about every 50 years, you set the people that work for you free. And not only that, as we go on down and find out more about the year of Jubilee, it turns out that if you have taken any land from another person, if you've bought land from someone, you have to give it back every 50 years, because the people would own every tribe owned a certain amount of land. And if parts of that land got redistributed, then you would have to call a redo, and everything goes back to the way it was in the year of Jubilee. And then finally, we've got laws of sacrifice. You have to be a part of the sacrificial system. If you have a falling out with somebody who lives in the camp, then you need to go to the priest and make an offering of restitution to bring your relationship back together. So really interesting stuff governing how you relate to one another as people within the camp. Stuff that might be good for us to reconsider how we relate to one another as Christians, and maybe even how we relate to those who are not Christians. How should we be acting? Should we be following things like a redistribution of wealth? Should we be following things like, oh, I shouldn't gain interest from others? I don't know, but these laws that govern relationships between people seem really important if you're going to have Yahweh living in your midst.